I actually lit a match and I put it on my arm to see how much it hurts.
Yeah.
And then I imagined that like all over my body for 5 minutes. And I like, this is unimaginable pain. I can't tolerate this for 5 minutes. How could I tolerate this for thousands of years?
Mm-hmm.
So I jumped out of the window in my school.
All right.
Neat.
How's it going? How are you doing today?
Good, good. How are you?
Pretty good. What did you? So you emailed me, or I think a
Oh,
third party
yes.
might have emailed me. Yeah, about chatting about, I guess basically Islam broadly, kind of, and then more specifically, the threat you would say it poses to the greater world.
Yeah, yeah. My friend Vikram
Mm-hmm.
emailed, I think, and suggested this to both of us. Yeah, I mean, I sent you a list of things that we could talk about. The two that I think you picked the two. One of them was why Islam is worse than Nazism,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one was the case against Islamic reform.
Mm-hmm.
And that one really bothers me. The people that are defending reforming Islam, I don't think you can reform cancer.
Well, yeah.
You
Well, which
just get
one?
rid of.
Where do you want to start?
What I mean, what do you prefer? We could talk about Islamic reform. I mean, do you have any views on yourself on this, so I could respond to it, or like
Yeah, I
agree
mean,
with
I
you or
would.
disagree with you?
I mean, I'm probably slightly in favor of some sort of reformation. I don't know how much I would focus on religious aspects over other cultural aspects. Um, but
Mm.
yeah, I
So
guess we could.
cultural
Yeah.
aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's a very big difference between supporting cultural Muslims, which
Mm-hmm.
is not really yet a thing, um, uh, versus Islamic reform. Those are completely different things. When you say cultural Muslim, I'm completely in support of that, because when you say the two that does exist is cultural Christians and cultural Jews, right? Cultural Muslims is still not a big thing. When you say cultural Christian or cultural Jews, you're talking about people who don't believe in Judaism or believe in Christianity, but they enjoy the rituals, the ceremonies, the communities, the gathering, the food. And to me, the belief is the problem. The rituals are not the problem. So if you support cultural Christianity and cultural Judaism and makes it easier for people to understand that they could actually give up the nonsense, give up believing in superstition, and yet keep the things that makes them enjoy life more, like all the I mean, you can enjoy Harry Potter, for example, without believing in Harry Potter. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't, you don't necessarily. So that I am in full support of. Like, I wish there was more of that in cultural Muslims who don't believe in Islam.
I mean, like
Islamic
you've
ref-
got like a decent amount of cultural Muslims in like other countries, in like Western countries now. I mean, arguably, even like in more extremist countries, you can argue that there are types of cultural Muslims, right? Like, for instance, like Saudi Arabia is historically seen as a pretty extreme country when it comes to how they, run their system. But I mean, like a lot of those guys fly to other countries to party and drink and whatnot. I mean, for various reasons, right? But, or like
um,
Muslims in
cult-
America. Or sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Muslims in America. If you say you believe in Muhammad as a prophet of God and the Quran as a direct word of God, and you believe in Allah, you're not a cultural Muslim. You believe this. Like, I have actually met like cultural Jews that are even rabbis, and like this is not very common. But I
Mm-hmm.
met there's rabbis that say like, oh, of course this is all fairy tale, and there is no God, but we this is just a cultural thing for us. That's cultural Jew. Cultural Muslims. I haven't. I mean, there are examples. I haven't seen Muslims that say like, "Oh, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in Muhammad. I just go to Eid because of the Eid ceremonies because of the food." That would be awesome,
Well,
right?
but there has to be like a middle ground, right? Where they're like,
N-
yeah, like I believe in Allah, I believe Muhammad was the prophet. Maybe I don't 100% buy into every tenet of the Quran. Similar to how a Catholic might say, I believe that Mary was a Virgin Mother, I believe in Jesus, but I don't know how I feel about like the institution of the Catholic Church or some other Christian, organization, right? Like I'm sure there's like a middle ground there somewhere, no?
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, First of all, mo- there are many Muslims
Oh wait, hold on one
who
second. Your
do
thing
not
is, what?
follow. Most Muslims do not follow.
I'm sorry. Hello.
Sorry.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me? I
Um,
closed on Twitch because I think there was too much stuff happening.
oh, sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So is everything good now, right?
I think so. Yeah. It sounds good now. Okay. Sorry. So
All right.
repeat your last statement. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. There's a difference between abandoning parts of Islam and reforming Islam. Okay,
Okay.
so most Muslims do not follow Islam. Most Muslims, I say, are better than Islam, just the same way as most Christians are better than Christianity, and most religious Jews. Like, when I say religious Jews, I'm trying to separate them for people who call themselves Jews because of ethnicity.
Mm-hmm.
Most religious Jews are better than Judaism. Um, the fact that most Muslims are better than Islam, that's no credit to Islam itself. Their humanity or their better values or their sense of sympathy or other sources of culture or influence or content has influenced them more than Islam could have. The influence of Christianity, Judaism, or Islam itself is always a negative influence, right? So when we keep pointing to Muslims and say like, oh, look at Muslims, look at all these Muslims. There are many Muslims who support gay rights. There are many Muslims who support women's rights, equality, peace, secularism. There's tons of example for that. But what reformers try to do is that they try to use these examples of good Muslims and be like, look, Islam can be reformed. And I always say like, no, Islam cannot be reformed. Muslims can be reformed. Muslims get reformed by moving away from Islamic values. When you're talking about Islamic reform, it's about looking at Islam differently and changing what Islam stands for.
Yeah. So
and as long as go on.
I don't necessarily I don't disagree with anything you said. Although at some point it kind of becomes like a matter of semantics, right? So like I used to say this a lot when I was younger. Like Christians in the United States haven't turned into better people. They've just become less Christian, right? It's kind of one way of looking at it. Yeah, of course. But I mean, like from an institutional point of view, I mean these churches still want to hold on to their rituals. They still want to hold on to their communities. So and I mean there are people that still want to be a part of a community and still want to be a part of like some organization, theology or not, that has all of these rituals and everything. So they have the religion. So I mean, like it feels like broadly speaking, it's more beneficial to speak in terms of reforming the religion, even if what you're really doing is like fundamentally changing how people view it. No.
Well, the problem with that is that as the religion itself is tied to a set of scripture that is fundamentally against many progressive values, right? Especially with Islam, right? In Christianity, there's some wiggle room. It could be like, oh, this is not from God. This is inspired by God. The vast majority of Muslims. I mean, it's very hard to find an example of Muslims who would disagree with me right now saying that if you don't believe that the Quran is a direct word of God, verbatim word of God, then you're not a Muslim. Like, I mean, you could try to change the definition of who a Muslim is.
Sure.
But every Muslim believes that. And I could tell you, the vast majority of Muslims have never read the Quran.
Same with Christians,
yeah. But they do believe that the Quran is the direct word of God.
Same with Christians, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, but, and this is a very problematic book. I mean, this is a book that promotes slavery. It's anti-woman. It teaches you that you should beat your wife in certain situations.
Sure, but like even if we look at what you like just said there, right, in terms of like the Quran is anti-women, right? There are 6 Muslim majority countries that have had a female like leader, like prime minister or president for their country,
Muslims.
Right? So, yeah, so
that's the difference between Muslims and Islam.
Sure. It just seems like that semantic distinction is going to make things like really confusing for a lot of people. Like these people would probably still consider themselves Muslims, not just culturally, but even religiously.
I didn't say they're not Muslim. Okay, so just because you don't follow Islam, that doesn't make you not a Muslim. The requirement for being a Muslim is very small. You just have to believe in God as Allah as God and Muhammad as his prophet and the Quran as a direct word of God. Even if you don't follow the Quran, I mean, even in Islam, you learn that a lot of Muslims are going to end up in hell. The fact that Muslims are going to end up in hell means that these are Muslims who haven't followed Islam. Not following Islam doesn't make you not a Muslim. It makes you a bad Muslim.
Okay.
And a bad Muslim is technically a good person.
Sure, I would say the same with a bad any religion is what I would say.
That's why I say that about Christianity as well. Like I say, like, oh, look at Christianity. Christianity has mellowed down. It's much less problematic than it used to be. I like, no, Christianity will always be a barbaric, violent, backwards, anti-science, anti-human, anti-Jewish, anti-woman, anti-gay religion. It will always be that as long as it has anything to do with the Bible. Christians have reformed by being more influenced by non-Christian values,
Science
by
and
being influenced by other sources, and by abandoning Christianity, by making Christianity a less influence in their judgment. So Christians have reformed, Christianity has not reformed. Right, and it has, and if you know, a lot of Muslim more reformers keep pointing to Christianity, like the Reformation movement, as an example of what we want for Islam, and that's horseshit, because the Reformation movement actually didn't achieve much when it comes to de-radicalization of Christianity. In fact, if you look at a lot of Protestants, they're more radical than the Catholics.
Yeah, well, and also Christian Reformation was that was literally like the 1500s. So I mean, like when people talk about Christian reform, like a lot of the positive progressive values we've seen have come in the last like 100 years from Christianity, not from the 1500s, right?
Right, and also the Enlightenment movement, which came a lot after, right? And the Enlightenment movement was not a movement that said, like, hey, let's look at Bible and read it in a different way, and let's pretend like these verses that are so evil mean something else. That was not the Enlightenment movement. Enlightenment movement, to some extent, was completely anti-religious, and in other aspects of it, it came up with better ideas, values superior to Christianity that were competing against those values. It wasn't like, hey, let's lie to people. And this is what I have a problem with the Reformation movement, as the modern Islamic Reformation movement, because we have other Reformation movements before that as well, is that it involves lying to people. What reforming in Islam requires is for you to tell Muslims that, hey, look, this verses that is clearly saying that, like, you should beat your wife if she's disobedient, it means something else. Okay, it means actually something else. Let's read it in a different way. And it requires lying to people. But when it comes to the methods that actually work, which is intellectually honest, is either promoting skepticism or it's promoting values superior to Islamic values, which has and will continue to influence Muslims. I mean, it's very interesting because even the leaders of the Reform movement, if you look at their own history and the way that they became de-radicalized, when you read their stories and their books, it wasn't because they read the Quran one last time in a different way and they're like, oh my God, this book is completely actually pro-peace and anti-violence. No, it was other people, other sources of influence, and other non-Islamic books that changed their mind. And now, even though they changed their mind based on other sources, they're prescribing to radical Muslims as something completely different from how they became de-radicalized. Like, they're telling them, hey, let's read the Quran in a different way. Like, that hasn't even worked on you. Why are you using this method?
Well, I mean, like, my guess is going to be that, like, there are going to be some exceptional people that might skepticism their way out of their particular religion, but it's probably not reasonable to expect that everybody would. Otherwise, there would be no religious people left, right? We have unprecedented access to information in this day and age. There's no real good reason to be, like a super religious person unless, you just don't, you want to be, right? Like...
But I'm not saying I'm not advocating for, like, oh, you either have to become an atheist or it's not good enough. I'm saying that Muslims and Christians and Jews, just like every one of us, is influenced by many sources of ideas, right?
Yeah,
it's not, Muslims are not just like, oh, let me see what Islam says, what the Hadith says, what the Quran says, and I'm just going to do that. They're influenced by the podcasts they listen to, by the YouTube videos they watch, by the books they read, by their parents, by their school. And what I'm saying is that the liberal Muslims that are out there, it's not because of any Islamic reform or rereading of the Quran that they have become liberal. It's because of these other sources of influence that they have become liberal. And what the Muslim reformers do is that they go to these progressive or liberal Muslims after you've already been convinced of superior values to Islam, and they're like, hey, guess what? The values that you're now following, these are actually according to Islam. They come and try to take credit for it after. And the only benefit that might provide is the comfort to these Muslims that, okay, you're not being anti-Islamic. But I tell you that you don't owe that comfort to these Muslims. None of these Muslims are going to go like, oh my God, I guess I have to beat my wife. If any of these Muslims are confronted about what Islam stands for, by the way, by confront I mean if they welcome it. Like, I don't go to Muslims who do not want to be talked to or do not want to be challenged, and I tell them like, oh my God, you believe in a lie. If a Muslim gives me their green light and wants to have a discussion, and if I tell them actually Islam stands for against all of these values that you're promoting, they're not going to be like, okay, I guess I'm going to join ISIS tomorrow. That's not like I give more credit to Muslims than a lot of these Muslim reformers do. They have already been convinced that this is not the right way to live, and the reaction to you challenging them on what Islam actually stands for is either they ignore you, or like they have this, or maybe they're convinced and they have this struggle in their mind and they're uncomfortable about it. A lot of them end up leaving Islam, and we have been very successful with that. And a lot of them, some of them might try to go out and find these reformers to tell them why they're actually good. They are actually following Islam, and that's just for the sake of comfort that they're still Muslim. And I think like that's a missed opportunity. I mean, that discomfort that the Muslims are feeling is not, it's not something that we need to get rid of. The discomfort is a good thing, and by getting them to get the easy route out by feeling comfortable and making like, okay, this is Islamic, you're not actually de-radicalizing people. These people were already de-radicalized or never were radical to begin with. All you're doing is you're making the challenge against Islam harder, because more good people are now calling themselves Muslims, and by inflating those numbers, you are giving legitimacy to a barbaric, backward ideology that needed to die yesterday. And this is the problem with Islam, compared to like shitty ideologies like Nazism. They enjoy these big numbers. They enjoy a lot of good people endorsing it, which gives it legitimacy and authority for fringe bad actors to be able to do a lot, even though they're fringe, use the legitimacy and authority of it to go into power, to create theocracies, and to do a lot of damage using that authority these good
I understand what you're saying, but I guess like the problem is that like I guess when I think of these types of ideologies, what I'm more concerned about is like what is a realistic path to success? Like how can we act in such a way that we can convert the maximum number of people? And I don't think there's ever, I could be wrong, my history is really bad, but I don't think in the history of mankind there's ever been like a movement where everybody was like, let's abandon our faith. It seems more like what's happened.
That's true.
It seems like more what's happened is that people have slowly over time, while maintaining their faith, have kind of modernized their views, even if they couldn't really justify that with whatever particular scripture they were reading. So like Christians are a good example. Like even Catholics, for instance, like there are a lot of crazy beliefs that even strict Catholics probably don't believe in. Catholicism is my background. So for instance, there's something called transubstantiation. The idea that when the priest blesses the wine and the bread, that's actually becoming the body and blood of Christ. Not a metaphor, but really it actually is. There's a lot of hardcore Catholics that are like, would consider themselves very Catholic, that don't actually believe that's true. Like, okay, well maybe it's not actually, So it feels like what happens over time is that people's views kind of modernize, they kind of sort of pick and choose the most convenient parts of the scripture, and then they move on, and that seems to be a better path forward than just expecting everybody to be like, oh, you're right, my religion is shit, no?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, but I'm saying the source of that gradual movement is not trying to reinterpret the Quran or the Bible. There's that reform movement, those kind of reform people, after people have already changed their mind or been de-radicalized, they come in after people have become progressive or liberal, and they try to take credit for these people, right? The same way like people, a lot of people on the right say, oh, look at these Western countries, the reason why they're advanced is because of Judeo-Christian values, whereas it had nothing to do with that. It was because of the Enlightenment value.
Well, sure, but I'm sure that what happens is probably like these things probably go hand in hand with each other.
No, they don't. Here's the thing. When it comes to the gradual movement, people are like, like some people call me like an atheist radical because it seems like I'm saying like I want atheism and nothing else. Nothing else short of abandoning Islam is good enough. No, I'm all for baby steps. I'm just for intellectually honest baby steps. Skepticism does work, and it actually is more practical. The reform Islam movement, what they have to do is they have to go pick up the Quran and they have to go over every single verse that is problematic and be like, okay, this verse actually means something else, and this verse actually means something else, and then go through the hadith, which is 1,000 times more content than the Quran, and do that with every single hadith that is problematic as well. And they have to come up with gymnastic arguments that is not even going to sell, because Muslims, guess what? Most Muslims can read. But when it comes to skepticism, which is another gradual movement. It's baby steps. You want baby steps? I have baby steps. All you have to do is like, hey, okay, you believe in God? Why? Like, and oh, you believe Muhammad was the prophet? You believe that Quran is the direct word of God? How do you know that? Like, are you sure? Could you be wrong? That is so much more practical. And you
Isn't
say like,
this, in terms of what you're talking about, though, in terms of like taking verses and like reinterpreting them for like modern day life, isn't this exactly what you would find happening like in any religious building ever? Like, isn't that why we go to temple or to church or to mosque, is to have a priest or a preacher or I don't remember what they're called in Islam, but like basically tell you like, oh, well, this is the text and this is how it relates to our lives and this is how we ought to live. Like, isn't that kind of the point?
what I'm saying is that the Muslim that is looking for somebody to tell them that the Quran is not in favor of wife beating, that's a person that doesn't want to beat their wife. And if another Muslim comes to them, or even, and especially an atheist comes to them and tells them, actually, no, this does mean you should beat your wife, they're not going to go tomorrow and start beating their wife just because. Most Muslims never read the Quran. Most Muslims don't, let alone the Hadith. The Hadith is, most Islamic teachings actually come from the Hadith, not even the Quran.
Sure, but
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, what I'm saying is that like so earlier I said these things probably go hand in hand. When I said that, what I meant is that like religious leaders, as culture shifts, probably instruct the members of their concession.
Right.
What am I looking for? The
Congregation?
Congregation, yeah. We'll probably start to address them in more progressive manners as well. So, for instance, when Catholics started to notice how big like gay movements were getting in the United States, all of a sudden we started to get hate the sin, not the sinner, right? Where now gay people were kind of sort of like, welcomed into these larger clergy, I guess you would say. They were welcomed into the church with the understanding like, okay, well, we're not necessarily pro-gay rights, but like we're not going to hate you just because you're gay. And I'm sure that like the preachers preaching that also probably went along with the culture moving as well, and it helps everybody kind of like move along together. No,
right. So what I'm saying is that itself is not an attempt to change people's values. That's a defense mechanism again for keeping the religion relevant in response to people already changing their values, right? So that's a defense mechanism. And I think that the reason why these reform movements are a problem is because we don't want to give religion a defense mechanism.
Yeah, but then it sounds like you're talking about making people into atheists then.
What?
Then it sounds like you're talking about making people into atheists. That's what it sounds like what you just said.
No, because what I'm saying is that you are defeating Islam in one Muslim if Islam goes from 10% influence to 5% influence in one Muslim, even if they're still Muslim, even if they still consider themselves Muslim, if you reduce the influence of Islam in one person, you are still winning. I'm not saying they should be an atheist. Let me give you an example of how sometimes they might feel like, let's just lie to people about their. This is basically replacing some fairy tales which we see as problematic or dangerous, and replacing them with different fairy tales. As atheists, we're supposed like, oh, let's just tell them a different lie, which might be less harmful. And I'm like, why would we need to lie to people? We don't need to lie to people.
Well, because some people need to be religious, right? I mean, I'm okay with that, replacing a less harmful fairy tale. So, for instance, the story of Adam and Eve, right, is ridiculous in my opinion, a ridiculous fairy tale. If somebody wants to say, well, that didn't really happen, that's like a metaphor for how God created the planet, well, fine, fuck it, that's fine. I think it's just as stupid, but sure, I mean, that's fine. At least that doesn't give you harmful views on like science or the creation of the world or something.
Right. The thing is that even if you want more of those interpretations, that comes as a result of people challenging religion, not because of people. The rereading of the scripture is a defense against people who are challenging religion outright. So even if you want more of those interpretations, the best way to get those is not to just go out and encourage rereading, is to just tell them why Christianity is bullshit. You will get more of those in response. Right. So here's one example that I often give about why lying to people for the sake of as greater good seems. So to some people might feel like, oh, you're gonna get better results in the for some people, because some people are not just ready for the truth. The example I give is like, imagine if you have a village which is struck by a disease, and this doctor happened to just show up in this village, and she notices the disease and she comes up with a medicine, and actually the medicine ends up working, but to make more of it, she's trying to sell it to make more money, to make more of the medicine, and people are not buying it. So she comes up with a lie, and she said, like, hey people, on my way to the village there was these fairies in the forest, and the fairies to the forest gave me this potion, and she told me that this will help you eradicate the disease. And then after she comes up with the story, let's say people line up and they buy the medicine, and she raises enough money to make more, and she eradicates the disease from the village. And people are like, oh, look, this is a great example. Sometimes maybe lying to people might actually be beneficial for getting rid of a harm. So, but here's the thing: imagine after she left the village, then other people come around and say like, oh, guess what, I also talked to the fairy. Now that she left and she established that the fairy forest fairies are a real thing, and now she created a platform where other people could build on this mythology, and other people are now going to come and take advantage of it. Like, hey, the forest fairies told me that these also make you have better sex or perform better at work or keep you awake or whatever. So, and then all of a sudden people are selling a whole bunch of fake drugs and making a lot of money. And some people actually might start putting drugs and making people addicted to it. They're like, hey, forest fairies told me. So once you establish a lie and people believe in it, you have a gullible community of people that are just ready there for bad actors to take advantage of.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but if we're talking about religious people, they're already gullible and ready for lies, right? I mean, I imagine if we're both atheists, I would imagine we would probably both be in agreement that religious people are already gullible or susceptible to stories or fairy tales that fit their existence, right? The fact of the matter is that there are some people that in a desperate search for meaning or for some greater purpose in life are always going to cling on to things that can give them that. Atheism can never give you that. It will never be able to give you that. You're not going to find objective meaning in life outside of some God figure. And if you need that, well, fuck, if you're going to listen to bullshit fairy tales, at least you can listen to one with some better outcomes. So if it takes forest fairies to convince you to give some medicine to your village, yeah, it's not a very good predictive thing. You're likely to believe dumb shit in the future, but at the very least, you can believe in the penicillin forest fairies, and then you can try some homeopathic shit later. But I mean, it's like one step at a time. You slowly reform people's fairy tales until they're more in line with what we believe to be scientifically true. And that's just how like religion makes progress over time. You don't get these huge waves of atheists. You get people that slowly reform their beliefs, become less religious, and that would seem to be the case how it goes.
But I didn't say like a wave of atheists. I'm already saying that no, I believe in baby steps, but skepticism actually does work. Just asking people how they know things, even with gullible people, could be less gullible, become just a little bit less gullible. That really does work. I mean, I've seen it work. You only have to make a person that believes 100% in Islam or another religion to go from 100% to 99%. People are less likely to make big sacrifices to their religion if they're only 99% sure about it. Like if that doctor spent more time trying to educate people for why this works, it might have seemed like the return on investment is small in the short term, but on the long term, I believe that spreading truth and fighting against lies might not seem like a good idea in the short term, but on the long run, it gives you much higher return on your investment, right? And you owe people not to lie to them. I think you don't like. This is why I don't understand atheists who are for Islamic reform. I mean, for Muslims who believe in Islamic reform, I forgive them because to me they believe that they're spreading the truth. But for atheists to be like, okay, this is a lie, but it's fine. Let's lie to people anyways because this might be beneficial to us. I think that seems selfish to me. That feels like let them believe in their own bullshit as long as they're not bombing us. Who cares who cares if they're like, other people might. I mean, for their own sake, I think we should make them less gullible. I mean, so for example, like palm reading, right? Palm reading seems like a superstition that doesn't cause any harm. I don't see any people waging war against each other because of palm reading. But if you believe in palm reading, you're a type of person that also is going to believe in vaccines cause autism, and that is a harmful idea. Like, so if I could convince you why you need to be more skeptical against palm reading, that you might just be encouraged to be more skeptical in general. If you allow harmless beliefs without evidence, you're also opening the door to harmful nonsense without evidence.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that, of course. Like,
okay.
This is why I'm an atheist, and it's why, like, predictiveness is the most important part of a person's belief system, right? If you believe a certain dumb thing, can I predict that you'll believe other stupid things in the future? I obviously I believe that, being an atheist. I guess maybe you're just a little bit more hopeful in terms of like people's ability to just abandon parts of their religion. But for me, it's so anecdotal. I wish I had like better examples. Well, I mean, we can look at whole countries sometimes, I guess, but like it feels like it's easier to tell somebody like, listen, like God actually meant this, instead of saying like, okay, well, this is bullshit. Like, just get rid of this part of your bullshit ass religion and you can keep the rest of your bullshit religion, but like at least know this is fake. Like, it seems like it's so much easier to phrase things in a way that that somebody else would understand within the context of the religion than to do it outside the context of the religion.
Well, we have the number. We have, and we're an atheist republic. By the way, atheist republic is the world's largest atheist community right now, right? So we have 2 million followers around the world, and we deal with talking to religious people and try to convince them out of the religion all the time.
Sure.
And we, by the way, check us out on YouTube, because our YouTube is very tiny. Our Facebook page is 2 million followers, but our YouTube doesn't seem to grow for some reason. So help us out there. But we we have seen, we have actually experienced thousands of people abandoning the religion. But even the numbers show that. Like, the numbers show that people are abandoning it. Like, you're talking about Muslims in United States. Actually, Muslims in the United States shows you how powerful the exposure to other competing ideas is, because Muslims in the United States live less in a bubble than Muslims in like Islamic country. And we have like a 25% rate based on that. Was amazing. I couldn't believe. I was shocked to see that. The new generation of Muslims, second generation Muslims in the United States, 25% are abandoning Islam. I didn't even, like, I'm very optimistic, and to me that number seems to higher than I could have ever imagined, right?
Sure, yeah.
But even the Muslims who remain Muslim but live liberal lives or progressive lives, if you go challenge them about the meaning of the Quran and the Hadith, they don't even know what's in the Quran and the Hadith. So how are they? Nobody came to them and be like, hey, don't beat your wife or be for gay rights because the Quran is for that. Like, they don't even know. So why are people saying like, hey, this might actually help more Muslims be liberal, when if you actually talk to them about the Hadith and Quran and they have no clue what's in it. So that is not why they're liberal. If they don't know what's in there, reinterpreting the Quran or the Hadith cannot be the source of why they're liberal.
Yeah, of course. I don't disagree. That's why I said it was kind of like, I bring back to that earlier phrase I made where I said hand in hand, that like it's more like exposure to culture, exposure to different values or whatever, exposure to different people over time probably like modernizes your views more. That's
why I say the best way to fight against Islam is to befriend Muslims. This is why a lot of people think like, oh my God, Armin wants Islam to die. He's an anti-Muslim bigot. And like, do you know how I suggest like fighting Islam requires convincing people out of their ideology? To convince people out of their ideology, you have to get their guards down. To get their guards down, you have to actually reach out to them and talk to them as friends. This is the complete, like the best strategy is actually the complete opposite of bigotry. Like, but you yourself are acknowledging that they are changing your opinions because they're exposed to better ideas, not because somebody is rereading the Quran to them in a different way.
Yeah, of course.
Why would we endorse? Okay, so why would we endorse this book then? We don't need to like tell them like, oh, this is actually a good book. I mean, this is a Godman, but I'm going to do it anyways. Imagine if people say like, hey, what if we, instead of telling people why Nazism is shit, why can't we just like read Mein Kampf and be like, hey, this actually might mean something else? Maybe when people were talking about the Aryan race, they were talking about our inner humanity. Everybody, black people, Jews, they all have their own inner Aryan that they could tap into. Let's just read it that way. Let's revise history and make Hitler, for example, a good person. There might be some Nazis that could just remain Nazis, but if we just read Nazism to this, they could actually be not racist. They could be progressive Nazis that actually.
Yeah, but I think you could do that. Like, I think there's actually evidence that already happens. Look how many people are like neo-Nazis today that are like Slavic and have no fucking idea that like Hitler would have executed, or how many Polish people or whatever in the Western world can be like with a Polish descent or whatever that are literal Nazis because they completely and totally reinterpret and review all of that. And just like religious people who've never read the Quran or never read the Bible, these guys haven't read Mein Kampf in the original German, or let alone a translation, or even like an annotated version of it. So yeah, I mean, I think that even with Nazism, I think it would be possible to get a totally different set of beliefs out of it. Yeah.
there's a difference between just being happy that somebody has better values than Nazism and has never read the Mein Kampf, than to actually chase Nazis and tell them, hey, actually go read the Mein Kampf, but let me tell you and follow it, but let me tell you that it actually means something else than it actually means. Those are two different things. Like, that's not a good idea. Hey, actually, yes, Mein Kampf is good. Follow it, but let me read it to you in a different way.
Yeah, so the problem is that like this is like so recent that it's easier to argue against. But like if we were to envision a world where we were 1,000 years removed from Hitler, like we are from Muhammad or Jesus or any other figure like that, right? If we were to envision that future world, and instead we had Hitler instead, and like let's say there were, how many Muslims are there? Is it like 2.1 billion? 1.8 billion Muslims in the world, right? If we went to a world where there were 1.8 billion Nazis, maybe instead of being like Hitler was bullshit, all this shit was bullshit, maybe it would be better to be like, hey, look, like we can have black Nazis and we can have whatever. It's like, it sounds silly, obviously, because we have a different context for Hitler, but that might actually be the way to go, rather than you just tell people like blanket, like, no, this was wrong or this didn't work or whatever.
Yeah, but the problem it is if you have a billion Nazis that are not racist, I can't believe I'm saying this, but if you have a billion Nazis that are actually not racist, what they're doing is that they are now making it much easier for more racists to use the authority that these high numbers of Nazis given to Nazi ideology. You will have, just right now, where we have more, like, we don't have any Nazi regimes right now. That are right, but we do have Islamic theocracies because of the legitimacy and the authority that the Quranic scripture has. So even if we lived in a world where there were a billion Nazis and they didn't actually believe the Nazi values, they just were nominal Nazis, just like most Muslims are just nominal Muslims, in that world it would be easier to have Nazi regimes that actually will use the real meaning of the text to oppress people.
Sure, but like, so isn't Jordan the country, or Jordan? Isn't that country like still like theocratic or like monarchy or whatever? And that's like
monarchy, not theocratic.
Okay, but
I mean, they respect Islam and all that shit, but theocratic, I'll probably say Saudi Arabia and Iran are good examples for theocratic.
Sure, okay. Because it feels like there are some Muslim majority countries that are relatively progressive with their values. Like I think Jordan was technically one of the first countries in the world to legalize gay marriage, although whether or not it was acceptable in public,
was it because of Islam?
Well, no, but this is what I'm saying.
No, thanks to Islam. I mean, you want examples like that? Let's go to the best. The time where Muslims had it the best. They call it the so-called golden age of Islam. I don't call it the golden age of Islam. I call it the golden age of Arabs and Persians, because it had nothing to do with Islam, right? There's nothing in Islam that made that empire great. It was if you look at, for example, I agree
100%. It's because they're betraying those core values. I've said the same thing about Christians forever, of course.
Right.
I guess it doesn't feel effective from a rhetorical point of view to tell somebody like how do you begin to have a conversation then with somebody that wants to be a moderate Muslim? How do you have a conversation with them to say like, hey, like this is why you should embrace your moderate values, without it just sounding like you're telling them to become an atheist? Because I know that you're saying that's not what you're saying, but that's what I keep hearing, I guess.
Well, this is what I would say to Muslim. Before I talk to them, there's different kinds of Muslims, so I have to know what kind of Muslim I'm dealing with. But usually,
we'll say like a Western world, like a first-generation immigrant Muslim in like America, or maybe a second generation, like their parents are Muslims and they came from a country like Iraq or something.
Right. The first thing I would do is try to get their guard down and try to convince them, before I even attack Islam, I would try to convince them why my attack on Islam is not anything against Muslims, right? And the way so that would be the first step. And the way I would do that is by showing them how it's possible to be against atheism without being anti-atheist. I tell them to imagine a Muslim who really wants to eradicate atheism. She hates atheism. She has made it her life mission to end atheism, and they usually interrupt you here like, oh, I don't want to end atheism. I'm like, I'm not talking about you. Imagine a Muslim that wants to do that, and the reason why she wants to do that is because she really loves atheists, and she's worried for them. She doesn't want them to burn in hell, and she's worried for their soul, and the reason why she's against atheism is because for their sake, right? So do you see how somebody could be very much against atheism, but not against atheists? In fact, she's anti-atheism because she cares for atheists. And usually that gets their guard down to see like, okay, it's possible to be against an ideology without being against the people. So that would be my first step, right? The second step is like, it would be to tell them like, by the way, I don't think I'm not 100% certain about my position. I just think Islam is dangerous, but I could be completely wrong. And if I'm wrong, I hope you could correct me. I hope you could convince me that. I hope you could convince me, because I don't want to burn in hell. So I hope that if you are right and I'm wrong, you manage to like. I'm hope so. And I also try to get them to admit, and this is usually when you hit a higher failure rate. Usually, you could get them to this part, that to convince them that there is a chance that they could be wrong. Right? I always tell them like, okay, so do you believe that? Are you like, do you have godlike knowledge? Like, you're not God, so you can't know everything. And given that, do you agree that you have a faulty logic, like everybody other than the God that you believe in could make mistakes? And given that you are capable of making mistakes, are you able to say that you hold any position 100%? Like, this is how I try to get them to admit that there's a chance that they could be wrong. Usually they say like, no, I could be wrong about other things, but with Islam there's no way that I'm wrong. But this is how I start a conversation, right? Here's another baby step. Even if I can't, by the way, I do get a lot of success on this. Like, a lot of people become more skeptical about their positions using this. But even with people that go from being 100% sure that Islam is true to remaining 100% sure that Islam is true, part of the purpose of this conversation is to get them to, okay, yeah, Islam is true and atheists are ridiculous, and okay, no, Islam is 100% true, but I see why somebody would be an atheist. Right? That's a huge win in my book, because that will require that position will encourage more tolerance
I feel
of
like,
atheists.
so I could be wrong, but like, so earlier you were mentioning how like the only moderate Muslims are the Muslims that would have been open to hearing like moderate arguments anyways.
No. Did I say that?
Yeah, well, you kind of said that like if you find a Muslim and you're able to convince them that like, well, maybe beating your wife or whatever is wrong or whatever, they're not believing that that's wrong because of Islam. They're doing it because they already would have had like some kind of moderate beliefs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what either because of their own sense of kindness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because for some reason that's
because...
not necessarily religious. Yeah. I mean, like when you're talking, if you can get a Muslim to admit that they might be wrong about the Quran, that's like 99% of the battle already, right? The big deal about like.
Yes, and guess what? It doesn't require me lying about anything.
Well, yeah, but I feel like most Muslims, if they're, well, most like theocratic religious ones, like what we're talking about, are never going to admit that. The Quran is literally like the text from God, right? More so even than the Christian scripture.
Right, but we have had success with this. A lot of success with this.
Yeah, but you don't think maybe the success that you have with that is literally just people that were already basically on the road to being skeptical? Like, because how would you respond to somebody that says like the Quran is the holy word of God, not written like loser Christians think, but actually like transcribed by God himself? How do you convince those people that like...
Yeah, but that they could be wrong. But that's why I also mentioned that even a smaller baby step than skepticism is to see why some deluded people might be atheists, just to tolerate our position. That's also a win. But these, I can tell you, like what I'm telling you is not just like theoretic. The number of people that are abandoning Islam or questioning Islam is way, way, way higher than what the reform movement has anything to show for. Like the number of, I can't count the number of people. On one hand, I can't count the number of people that say like, oh, I was a radical and I was convinced by reform arguments that I shouldn't be radical.
Are there like entire countries though that are kind of sort of like moderating over time, like Tunisia or Turkey? Like, aren't these countries that still have a lot of Muslims in there, but they're like their values over time have become a lot more moderate?
Yes, but not because of Islam. That's what I'm saying. What the reform movement has to show is not the radicals that have become progressive because of competing or better ideas. What the reform movement has to show is Muslims who are liberal because of reform arguments. Reform arguments do not work and they don't make sense because they involve lying to people. And I mean, Muslims are not idiots. To be fair to Muslims, they can tell like if they actually go open their book and read it, which I want them to do. There's new studies that actually shows that more people who read the Quran question their religion even more, right? So, you know, the idea that actually, you know, here's the thing, the reform movement actually helps people stop questioning. You just put them in a comfortable position. You had some discomfort, and that discomfort was so valuable because now they might have done some research and investigations and come up with the truth. But you're just like, hey, no, stop. Let me just put you at ease, be comfortable. Islam is okay with all of this, and go live by your life, and you don't need to think about it anymore. I'm saying that was such a missed opportunity, right? That's what the reform arguments don't actually work in making people think about anything. It's actually a movement that helps people stop thinking rather than challenging. Hey, am I here?
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, I understand what you're saying. Sure.
Oh, did I get cut off?
No, I
right?
hear you. I hear you.
All right. I mean, you mentioned Tunisia. Tunisia is a great example. Tunisia, look at all the secular activists and atheist activists, or feminist activists, and all the people that are working there and challenging the theocrats there and the Islamists there. These activists in Tunisia, they're not using the Quran, right? Look at why is Tunisia different than than Iran and Saudi Arabia. It's not because of the reform movement. They have been influenced by other sources of influence, by better literature, by better philosophy.
Yeah,
I mean,
I guess
Iran,
it's so hard. We're
Iran,
not connecting on this, right? Because we're just missing it. Because even so, in Tunisia, 99% of the people there are Muslim, and the government itself serves as the protector of Islam. You have to be Muslim to be a president in Tunisia. It seems like,
and that's the best you could hope for, I guess. Tunisia is even in the best. This is how bad Islam is. That even in the most liberal Islamic countries, you still have such anti-secular governments like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, if you look at here, let me give you two examples. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about Tunisia, but think of Iran and Turkey. Turkey during Ataturk and Iran during Reza Shah. I mean, Iran during Reza Shah. Did you know that Iran during Reza Shah's time, before the Islamic Revolution, it was illegal for people to wear the hijab in public. So Iran went from the only country, and I don't endorse this, I'm against this, by the way, but I'm just telling you how anti-Islamic Iran was. Iran went from the only country in the world where hijab was illegal in public to now the only country in the world where hijab is mandatory for everyone in public, including non-Muslims and foreigners, right? That's a huge shift, right? And nobody during Ataturk's or Reza Shah times could predict that these countries will become so as Islamic as they are today, especially with Iran. The thing is that when you have a shitty ideology that you're defeating it, and it's now in the corner and it's on its back, and it will put on a mask. It will put on a mask to look like it's not harmful because it's about to be defeated. And when it puts on a mask and this is not because people in a room are coming up with conspiracies on how to survive. This is just how the memes survive. It will just changes the way it looks, so that you have the beast, you have the sword, and you have your foot on its throat, and then all of a sudden it goes from looking like a beast to like a little cute puppy, and you step away. But no, when it's that's the point where you actually put the sword in his head and end it in the job. That's not when you go back. Because guess what? Look at Iran today. Look at Turkey today. You don't let shitty ideas survive when they're harmless. Shitty ideas, lies, things that are not based on evidence, things that are based on faith and revelation. You go after them. You fight for the truth always. Not when it comes and bites you in the ass, because if you just let them fester, they will eventually be harmful. This is a very simple. I'm not making an extraordinary claim. I'm claiming that if you fight for the truth, always, in the long run, you're gonna see benefits. If you just promote lies that may seem like a good idea in the short time, you're going to see a good return on your investment. But in the long run, that's a bad strategy. It's always it's often a better. I don't want to say always. It's usually a better idea to be on the side of the truth.
Sure.
Yeah, regardless of how harmful it is. That's why I will be as aggressively against palm reading as I am against Islam.
Aggressively against what? Oh,
palm reading or zodiac signs. Like I will be against those as well. I don't wait. I don't. If the filter that you have to introduce to people is to the filter that you have for them to recognize what is bullshit and what is not bullshit, right? If you remove that filter and we're like, after they pass that gate, once you open that gate, you don't really have that much control over where people land. If most people land on progressive or good ideas, it's because of their own sense of sympathy or other sorts of ideas. It's not because you actually manage to, if you don't give people better bullshit radars, you have lost them already. If you let these bad ideas just people, when people are gullible, and if you're like, oh my god, these people are gullible, they're beyond hope, let's just give them some shitty ideas that will be less harmful to us. These are people. Gullibility is not something that people are. It's not like something that they're born with and they will always be like that. This is something that could be challenged, and you don't have to completely make people not gullible. You can make them less gullible. I mean, for their sake, even if it's not for your sake, somebody who's gullible is somebody that could be taken advantage of, somebody that could be conned, somebody that could be convinced that they need to give away 10% of their income, somebody that could be convinced to vote for somebody that is not in their best interest, somebody that could be recruited to participate in someone's war, somebody that might elect a politician that bans vaccines because they cause autism or whatever, right? So I mean, even people like Islam, even if it's not just the suicide bombings or the wars. It's like it's a dad that is going to a mosque instead of spending time with his daughter, right? It's the government that all of a sudden decides to ban interest rate because they're on-Islamic. Religion fucks with our lives in much more ways than it's just like a suicide bomb here or there. It's the more people have.
Yeah, I agree with all of this. I'm an atheist, right? Of course. Okay. I think
yeah.
As soon as you're susceptible to religious thought, I don't disagree.
I know you're an atheist. I know you're an atheist, but I'm just saying, like, we shouldn't treat people like, okay, I'm an atheist. I know what's right, but you idiots, you cannot be convinced of this. So I might as well just give you some, fairy tale that makes you go sit in the corner and leave me alone. I just don't think that's the right attitude.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry, I went for too long.
No, yeah, that's fine. I mean, I guess I kind of I broadly understand. I guess I'd be curious to see like what ends up being more effective in the long term. I guess we'll see how things play out around the world. But
we have the historical numbers to back us up, and we also have the current numbers to show our method is working better. Like, I'm not just coming up with theories.
Sure.
Okay. I will put my numbers next to any Muslim reformist any day. Yeah.
All right. What was the second topic you wanted to chat about? Or that, I guess you gave me a few, and then I picked two of them.
Oh yeah, I was mentioning why Islam is even worse than even Nazism.
Oh yeah, that seems like a hard one, but go for it.
I mean, it's so obvious to me. I mean, to be fair, I think if Nazism as an ideology was able to survive as long as Islam was, it would be way more destructive. But I think like ideologies such as like Nazism are weaker memes than Islam or Christianity. So the fact that they're weaker and they don't manage to survive as long is part of what makes them less dangerous.
Oh, well,
right?
Of course. I mean, that's kind of like when people say, like, the United States does more harm than any other country in the world. Well, that's true. The United States also does more good or charity than any other country in the world, but that's just because of the size of the country, right?
Yeah, so it's kind of, I mean, so it's like a difference between, like, Islam versus Nazism is kind of like the Kalashnikov versus an atomic bomb.
Sure.
If you were using atomic bombs as much as a Kalashnikov, I'm pretty sure they would be a lot more devastating. Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
But Kalashnikovs have a lot more victims than atomic bombs because they're just. And part of the reason why Islam is a stronger meme is the fact that it manages to use, a lot more good people to convince people that it's a legit, ideology. Like, it's harder to convince good people that Nazism is okay than Islam, and that's what makes Islam a lot more dangerous. And this is why Islam has like a whole bunch of sugarcoating, and Christianity also too. Oh, love thy neighbor. Like Islam has take care of orphans.
We probably don't disagree at all. It's just a way of framing it. So, like, for instance, like sugar is more dangerous than arsenic. Well,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, if you eat arsenic, you're probably going to die. But, I mean,
Right.
like, sugar is more pervasive and more likely to be consumed by a person, right?
Oh, so we agree then. Islam is more dangerous than Nazism.
Well, yeah, I guess it's just kind of it's a really, really, really inflammatory. Listen, I would say that's a dumb take, but on Twitter, I would probably tweet that. So, yeah, there you go.
Well, let me tell you why it's not it's not that dumb to say, because one thing that I try to do is not just to convince Muslims. I also try to convince a whole bunch of anti-Muslim bigots in different ways of looking at Islam, to look at Islam as a disease and Muslims as a patient, rather than the Muslims as a disease themselves, right? And also tell them that actually the main victims of Islam are Muslims themselves. So we fight against Islam not for the sake of protecting the West. We fight against Islam for the sake, because we care for Muslims, and they are they are the main victims of Islam. And with a title like that, I usually do attract a whole bunch of anti-Muslim bigots. And then when they read my comments or follow the video, they see actually I am very sympathetic to Muslims themselves, which does convince a few of them. I have seen a whole bunch of people, anti-Muslim bigots, who have followed me for years, change their tune or their views a little bit. So I think that's also another form of activism, right? I mean, a lot of people start following me because of my anti-Islam rhetoric, and then they see like my channel all of a sudden becomes focused on, and we have like an atheist channel that constantly shits on China, which is an atheist regime, for the way they treat Muslims, right? Or we had a whole bunch of Hindutva people who really hate Muslims follow our channel because of our anti-Islam content, and now we're like attacking, the BJP party in India for the way they treating Muslims, and we lose a lot of them, but some of them stay around and change their mind. So that's another reason why I might frame it like that.
Okay.
It's like a trap. It's like a trick.
Yeah, sure.
get
Yeah.
you.
Inflammatory. Yeah.
Right. Right. So okay. So that second part doesn't seem that, So you agree on that? Okay. Good. I mean, by the way, this was a lot more. This was very productive. I really enjoyed it because your comebacks and the way you challenge my views is really nice. I enjoy that.
Okay.
Yeah. How long have we been going? How's the live chat going?
They're cool. It's about an hour. I don't think fundamentally we probably don't disagree on much. Just though you phrase things in very, very, very aggressive ways, which I guess I do. I do that online a lot too. So,
yeah. I mean, part of the reason, the way I talk to Muslims is completely different from when I talk about Islam to my atheist community. When I talk to a Muslim, I become a lot more, sympathetic, and I don't talk to them as aggressively as I am talking to our community against Islam, because there's completely different reasons. For example, I have videos on YouTube on burning the Quran, right? And we had I have a video that went viral on Facebook that I went to Vancouver gay pride parade, and I had like a sign that saying Allah is gay. And the reason why I do those things is because people tell me that you can't or you shouldn't, and we're just trying to challenge, the red lines that people keep drawing around certain things that we're not supposed to say or do. Those are mostly for the sake of making sure that nobody can tell us what to say and what not to say. And also, when we're talking to our atheist community about Islam and Christianity, that is not necessarily to change Christians or Muslims' mind. That's just basically us building an atheist community and talking about the things that we agree. I mean, if Muslims are who are offended by that, we're not going to them with this content. If they are seeing this content, it's because they chose to see it. Like they can't go. Yeah. So, but if my strategy is to actually convince a Muslim out of their position, I wouldn't use the same aggressive tactics against.
Yeah, sure.
I wouldn't say like, oh, why to a Muslim? Okay, tell me what you think about Islam. Why should I question Islam? Oh, because Islam is worse than Nazism. That's why. Because like, I don't. That's not how I talk.
Sure.
Right.
What? Just curious. So, what is your particular background? You're from Iran?
Yes, I'm an ex-Muslim from Iran. I'm also Iranian Canadian. Right now, I live in the Philippines. But yeah, actually, one reason one of my personal experiences is the reason why I use this story to make my case as well. Because when I was a kid, I was very scared of going to hell. And I couldn't understand why other people were not terrified. Like it seemed like everybody around me believed in hell, but nobody was that concerned about going there,
Yeah.
even though it was a real possibility. Like people were more worried about their grades, careers, fashion, cars, or anything other, like the party next week. But it seemed like people believe that there's this place that you're going to be screaming for a very, very long time, and angels are going to be torturing you and pouring molten lead down your throat. But people didn't seem to be worried about going there. This is actually described in the Quran. Yeah. So I remember crying about it, and I remember my aunt actually finding out that this was pre-elementary school. She told me, "Don't worry, Armin. Only like rapists and murderers go to hell." But then when I actually went to school, they told us actually no, most people, including most Muslims, are going to go to hell. So my parents were nominal Muslims. They drank alcohol. They only went to a mosque only when somebody died or when somebody was getting married. They never fasted. They never prayed.
Yeah.
And I asked my teachers, "Are they going to go to hell?" And they were like, "Yeah, they're going to go to hell, of course." So I was very upset about that as well. And the thing that I learned in school was that for in Islam there's no sin before age of maturity, right? The age of reason, right? Again, this is many years later I learned that Christianity is actually you're born with sin, but this is not in Islam. That's not the case. In Islam, if you're a child, you cannot have sin because you're not mature enough to be held responsible for your actions, right?
Yeah.
So you have to hit the age of reason. And again, the specifics of this is different among Muslims, but the way we learned it in school is that the age of reason for boys is 15 and for girls is 9. So that meant that there's no way for me, there's no way for me to sin before age 15, right? Suicide is a sin in Islam. But then I put 2 and 2 together. I was like, well, suicide can't be a sin if I commit suicide before age 15. So I felt like I found a loophole in the system. I felt like, okay, if I kill myself before age 15, I die without sin, so I can't go to hell, so I end up in heaven. So why wouldn't I just kill myself before age 15 and make sure I don't go to hell?
Yeah.
So to make sure that I got this right, I went to my religious teacher and I'd ask him, why wouldn't I just kill myself to make sure that I don't go to hell? And he said, well, because if you go to heaven because you died as a child, you go to the lowest part of heaven. Because you didn't earn heaven. Like apparently heaven has different layers, and the best part is where the martyrs go, and that's where Muhammad is. And the lowest part is where people go who died before they were getting the chance to sin. I thought to myself, I don't give a fuck which part of heaven I go to. I just don't want to burn. I could take I could take a parking lot for eternity if that guarantees me not burning. I actually lit a match and I put it on my arm to see how much it hurts.
Yeah.
And then I imagined that like all over my body for 5 minutes. And I like, this is unimaginable pain. I can't tolerate this for 5 minutes. How could I tolerate this for thousands of years? So I jumped out of the window in my school. I broke both my legs. I broke my left arm. I fractured my back. I was in a wheelchair and my bed for like 7 months. I missed 1 year of school. The only reason why I didn't try it again is because I saw what it did to my parents. I saw my mom collapse in the ground in the hospital. I saw my dad cry for the first time. They blamed themselves because I didn't tell them why I did this. But yeah, and that's why I didn't try it. And when I hit age 15, I was like, shit, I have to play this game now because the consequences of losing is so high. I need to be a proper Muslim now. So I became very religious. I lost a lot of friends because of that, because I was in a more liberal part of the city. Plus, I missed 1 year of school, so all my friends were in next grade anyways. And that loneliness made me even closer to God. But yeah, I mean, but even to this day, I think my logic was sound, given the premises. If the premises were true, my conclusion is flawless. And I couldn't understand why most other people didn't come to the same conclusion as I am.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird like religious loopholes like that. For instance, like I remember learning in school that it was impossible for you to go to hell if you had never heard of God? Because one question people would always ask is like, well, what about all of the like Native Americans in the United States that have never heard of God? They're going to go to hell because they don't believe. And then the teacher would always be like, well, if they haven't heard of God, then they can't, go to hell. And it's like, well, doesn't that make you like a huge asshole if you like tell people about God if they've never heard of him? Because now you've like, they had a 0% chance of going to hell before, and now they, they're fucked. Yeah. Or in Catholicism, it's like, can I do any crime if I go and like do contrition afterwards? If I, go to reconciliation and I say I'm sorry, like, can I go do whatever? And then,
Actually, the kindest thing to do is to go to all the people that haven't heard about Christ, if any of this is true, is to go kill all of them before the missionaries get to them.
Well, yeah, I mean, in some, I mean, in some level, even like the suffering of those people was seen as like righteous and shit anyway, right? But yeah, I mean, technically, rules as written, it seems like that would be the case. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you would be like, oh, but you go to hell because you killed innocent people. Yes, I'm sacrificing myself by going to hell, but saving a whole bunch of people from going to hell by killing them. So you just like every single country that hasn't heard of Christ, just drop a nuke on them and save them from going to hell before the missionaries can go there and make hell a potential, make it possible. I mean, this would be the most utilitarian conclusion that you could come up with if you wanted to take all of these ideas. This is a problem with shitty ideas, shitty premises. If you apply good logic to bad premises, you have to come up to really weird and bad conclusions. The only way you can start with bad premises and get to good conclusions is to encourage bad logic. Right? This is why I'm saying, like, attack the premises itself rather than trying to get to good conclusions by promoting bad logic. It's the methodology that matters, not the conclusion. Promote proper methodology rather than good conclusions, right? And religions sometimes randomly come to good conclusions, but if you use those good conclusions as a way to promote a bad methodology, a methodology that more often gives you bad answers. So
yeah, of course.
Those small good conclusions are actually makes the religion more dangerous because now they could be used as marketing tactic for a bad methodology. And like also the scientific method or using logic and reason and evidence-based outcomes research, of those are good methodologies, but they don't always give you good answers. Sometimes they give you bad answers. And people who are against the scientific method, they use those bad examples, bad answers, like, oh, look, science is responsible for this or that, as to market against a superior methodology. So again, this is why I'm saying, like, don't look at the conclusions, one or two conclusions. The average conclusions of the scientific method is superior to the conclusions of religion and faith. So don't be like, oh, let's promote Muslims who using Islam to support gay marriage, because by doing that you're using a good conclusion to promote a bad methodology.
Sure.
The methodology matters more than the conclusion.
Always, yeah, of course, so that you can get good conclusions in the future, right?
More often, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost died because of these bad methodologies. Anyway, what are you playing? I can't see. I can't open it because I have a crappy computer. So if I open this and
no, right now my stream is just all they can see is my camera and your camera, basically.
Oh, really? What is the live chat saying? I wish I could see. I wish I could see anybody. If anybody,
I think most of them agree with what you're saying. I mean, like I said, we're basically on the same page with everything. You're saying a lot of the stuff that I normally say, where the idea is that basically, like thought processes are more important than conclusions because you're trying to predict future thoughts, right? So if somebody uses a bad methodology to get to some conclusion, that doesn't matter because they might make a bad conclusion in the future. So you ought to promote good methodologies rather than just answers, right?
Yeah. And we had Sam Harris on our podcast, Secular Jihadist podcast, and he told me he's for Islamic reform. So he said exactly this. He said, if we could just invent a new religion that is almost as bad as Islam, but it's just 10% less bad, that's progress. And that's not, I don't agree with that, because that's basically promoting the right conclusions rather than the methodology itself. If if you have 10% less bad Islam and be like, oh, that's progress, you are actually using those 10% better ideas to promote Islam, and Islam is the wrong methodology, right?
Yeah.
That's why I'm against Islam. No matter how, if you came up with a religion that was based on faith and God and revelation, that was 100% peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have any violence in it. In fact, it was very pro humanity, pro like equal rights and all that good stuff. Everything that we see as enlightenment values. So let's have a religion that all the values from the Enlightenment era.
Mm-hmm.
It promoted all of that, but the reason why it promoted all of that was because it came from God. It was a revelation from God that these are superior values.
Mm-hmm.
That is dangerous because now you're promoting a methodology that some other people like. Imagine if you find a napkin in a bar that said like, I don't know, behead people who don't believe in the napkin religion,
Mm-hmm.
and then you went and said somebody like, okay, I'm gonna follow this religion. I'm gonna go behead anybody that doesn't believe in it. And you went to them and like, listen, no. Let's reread this. Maybe by killing means like kill them with love. Just love them to death, and bring them to the napkin religion. By that, like, obviously doesn't mean that, but let's just try. Let's try. Like, what the fuck are you doing? You're encouraging people to just believe in random napkins that they find in a bar. You should be tackling that. You should be like, what? Why the fuck are you just following this random napkin? This is not the right way. That's
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, of course, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I think we covered. Unless you have more questions.
No, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it just comes off as like, or I guess it just comes out to like, I guess whichever ends up being more successful in converting people. I mean, obviously, I'm massively in favor. If you can get people to abandon like irrational thought processes, I'm always in favor of that. It just seems like really difficult to do with large groups of people. But I mean, if that's the way forward, then that'd be great. Yeah.
I mean, we can't expect dramatic shifts all of a sudden.
Sure.
We make gradual changes.
Yeah, of
right?
course, yeah.
So when people say like, "Oh, your method is not going to give you like, oh, it's not going to make the whole world atheist. It's not going to convince 2 billion Muslims out of Islam," Armin, like, I didn't never said it does. I'm just saying it works better. Is much superior than the reform movement. In fact, the reform movement is not less helpful; it's unhelpful. Right? I mean, that's, say like, okay, give me a better alternative. It's good. I'm not going to convince hundreds of thousands of people by next week. We are going to make gradual changes, but our gradual change is the fastest one. It is gradual, but it's the best one. Encouraging skepticism, encouraging critical thinking, encouraging people to, even who are not skeptical, to accept people with different views. Those work. It's gradual. It's not going to give you atheists overnight, but all change is gradual. And it's intellectually honest. That's the most important thing. Like, why would you lie to people? This is atheists. I mean, this is why I get pissed off atheists who support Islamic reform, because they're actively supporting lying to people. Muslims who are for Islamic reform, I don't get that triggered by them, because they at least believe in their own nonsense.
Sure. Yeah.
By the way, guys, if you can, I plug
your website or your Facebook or whatever.
Yeah, check out Atheist Republic. We're a 501c. We're a world's largest atheist community. We really do need help on YouTube. It's funny because we have a Persian channel, which we make English channel and Persian channel. I make content for Iranian atheists as well. And our Persian channel, even though it's much more recent and much smaller, is getting a lot more views than our English channel, because I think all the things that triggers YouTube algorithm for why our content shouldn't be shared or recommended, they don't have Persian triggers for that. I think they only have like English, and that's why our Persian channel is not getting as deprioritized.
Sure. Yeah.
As our English channel.
What's the channel for your YouTube? What's it called?
Oh, Atheist Republic.
Okay, gotcha. If they search for, okay, gotcha. We'll link it in chat. Wait, I'm just curious. There's a guy that I know online called Ask Yourself.
Oh yeah, he doesn't like me.
You talked to this guy about veganism. How did that conversation go?
He really disliked what I said. He was very offended, and he got so triggered. He hung up on me. I don't know what I did. and we agreed before going on live before starting a discussion with him. It wasn't live. He was recording. That he's gonna release the video. And I'm like, okay, so you're recording. I don't have to record. And he's like, yeah, don't worry about it. I'll record it. And I'm like, are you sure? And I made sure like he's gonna do it. And he recorded it, but he was so upset with me at the end of the discussion that he didn't release it. And I'm like, okay, can you send me a copy? I release it. And he's like, no, go fuck yourself or something like that. And I didn't really try to. I kept on saying, like, even during the discussion when I seen he was getting so worked up, I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to make you upset. But he was so upset. I mean, even after the discussion was over, I messaged him. I was like, sorry that you on Facebook. I'm sorry that you make you upset. That was not my intention. And he's like, oh, he said, go fuck yourself. So
What was he so upset over?
I guess. Well, I mean, I don't want to strawman him, So I could tell you. I mean, but maybe he was upset that my okay. So the conclusions that I come to, my values for animals and humans were kind of consistent. So when he came up with examples that makes the humans comparable to animals in those conditions, I kind of accepted that in those situations it would be okay to kill humans and eat them as well, but we don't live in that world that those conditions are met. But then he came to the conclusion that the way he framed it is like, you're for holocaust of disabled people who are not self-aware. I was like, and I told him, well, I don't like that framing of it. This is how I frame it. And he's like, well, and he said, well, my framing of it is accurate. And I was like, well, my framing of it is accurate as well. He's like, no, you're sugarcoating your position. I'm like, well, you call it sugarcoating, but the way I'm saying it is also completely accurate, completely represents what I'm saying. But the world that I said that I would be okay with is not the world that we live in. Like, we had to change too many factors for us to be able to be okay with killing humans without pain and eat their meat
and everything. Yeah.
Like, yes, so many things had to change for that condition to be met. But yet he said, like, oh, my framing of it is for you're okay with the Holocaust of disabled people. And I was challenging, and he got so worked up and he hung up on me, and he's like, I'm not going to release the video.
All right, well.
And he said, thank you for wasting 2 hours of my time or something like that.
Yeah.
I really wasn't trying to make him upset. I was really not. I mean, I think I was very polite. Like, but he just didn't like my position.
He's a pretty passionate, vegan guy, so it means a lot to him, I think. The arguments do.
I mean, if I was so wrong, he might as well release the video to embarrass me. Like, if he thinks like I'm so. I mean, if I was that bad, it's good for him to show it, to show how how bad my arguments was against veganism. So I don't understand. Like, yeah. Anyways.
True. Yeah, no, it's true.
Right.
He's a pretty famous internet debater guy, so it's kind of funny. He gets really mad pretty often at a lot of things. So.
Yeah, but I'm still. I mean, if he's listening to this, I apologize to him if I made him upset. I was not intending to do that at all. So
okay.
There was that.
All right, cool.
I mean, I am getting into debating against vegans more. So if any vegans wants to invite me to their channel, I would be interested in that. Are you a vegan?
No, I'm not.
No. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, listen, thanks. I appreciate the conversation. It's been fun.
Yeah, this was fun. I really like your takes.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
I think we've got your YouTube stuff and everything, and your website is linked in the chat, and then it'll probably be linked in the YouTube video, I imagine, as well. So yeah, good luck with your mission. I mean, if we disagree, it's literally only on what looks the best on the optics. Like, I don't disagree with you messaging your ideas at all. So yeah.
Strategy.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right. Okay. Talk to you soon. Maybe talk to you again.
Yeah.
At some point.
Thanks a lot, man. I'll talk to you later.